What is going on, everyone? How are you doing? I hope you're doing good, because it is good to feel good, and it is officially the end of 2024, which feels sad to kind of like sign off this year, but I'll be completely honest, I've actually really enjoyed 2024. And, you know, I've got up to some really fun stuff throughout this year, which is what I'm going to talk about in this video, of course, because at the end of each calendar year, I always talk about, you know, just what I've gotten up to in the year, like, you know, month by month. I've done some really cool stuff this year, I'm not going to lie. But there have also just been a few other things that have happened throughout the year for myself. So, first of all, I have lived past 10,000 days of my life now. The fun fact, the 10,000th day of my life was April the 6th, 2024, and that has something to do with this, of course. But we'll talk about that in a short while. And also, I've slowly but surely started growing some grey hairs, or like they've started to come through, which is just like a bit depressing to think about in hindsight. And given I'm only 28 years old, and you know, this will probably be the case for me going forward. I'll see more and more grey coming through, and probably by 40 I'll be a silver fox, you never know. But anyway, let's have a little chat about 2024 in depth, month by month, and just, you know, let's have a little, you know, rewind the clock. What did I get up to in 2024? Starting off the year, of course, we start off in proper fashion with January, and I'll be completely honest, this January was a quiet one for the most part, but I did get up to something really cool at the end of the month, which was I went to attend an event held by Hooked on Wrestling, which was the Royal Rumble this year, and that was a really fun event to kick off the year. As it is every year for WWE. As part of the event, I was part of the winning quiz team. I buddied up with a few people, and my wrestling knowledge really played off, and we won the quiz. The irony of this was that the prize that we won was tickets for the next Hooked on Wrestling event, which was for WrestleMania, and for obvious reasons I wasn't going to attend that, but you know, I would pass that on to my quiz teammates, and I was like, you guys have a good time. And also take a +1 in the absence of me. Tell you what, the Rumble itself this year I thought it was pretty decent. One match that I think stood out for me was the Women's Rumble. I think probably, in my opinion, this is the best Women's Rumble to date. It had the likes of returning Naomi, who had just returned to WWE after finishing up in TNA. Speaking of TNA, there was the then TNA Knockouts champion Jordynne Grace, who had appeared in the match. There was the in-ring debut of Jade Cargill, a returning Liv Morgan, and all sorts happening throughout that. And it was won in a satisfying way by Bayley, and obviously she would go on to WrestleMania. The other two matches, apart from the Men's Rumble, I think they were okay. They served their purpose, and I think it was a given that Roman was going to retain. And then, of course, Logan Paul retained his US Championship via shenanigans, so good on Logan. And then the Men's Rumble, I guess it was alright, I guess. You know, I was buzzing at the end because, of course, Cody Rhodes won back-to-back Royal Rumbles and cemented his, you know, ticket to WrestleMania. Although, I will quickly acknowledge the whole hoo-ha about him relinquishing his opportunity in favour of The Rock, then that getting retconned at the Las Vegas press conference and officially announcing he was going to challenge Roman. But then, off the back of that, we got a really good build to WrestleMania this year, and I will talk about that momentarily as well. For February and March, I'll be completely honest, they were my quiet months for this year. I didn't get up to much, mainly because I was saving up for my trip to Philly, which we will come on to. But some things I did do in February and March was getting prepared and playing a lot of video games. So one game that I was playing in preparation for another game being released was Final Fantasy VII Remake, and sure enough, at the end of February we had the release of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I've probably talked about it before, how Final Fantasy VII, the original game back from 1997, is probably one of my favourite video games of all time, and I love it for its, you know, for its gameplay. Its story is probably my favourite part of the game, and it's nice to see this story being adapted, like, you know, for the modern experience, for a modern remake, and it's just great to play through again. Everything's all expanded, you know, characters are more fleshed out, and it's just great to play through. And yeah, if I find myself doing something like streaming or something in the future, I think I might focus on that for 2025 actually, is probably get into streaming, because I play enough games, it's like I should just really be streaming myself for this. And there was also something really fun that was related to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth that I did later in the year, but I will talk about that when we get there. And then we come on to April, and I make it no secret that April was probably my favourite month of this year, and for no other reason than the fact that I was in Philadelphia for WrestleMania 40. And it's such a great experience this was. I really think fondly back of this trip, and just like how incredible it was from like start to finish. So before WrestleMania itself, I did a lot of fun activities. I explored around the city of Philly itself. I went to recreate the famous scene from Rocky at the Philadelphia Museum of Art and on the Rocky steps. I was part of Remix Rumble and I filmed for the event. I've talked about this before, but this was probably one of my other big highlights of 2024. Like, just getting to record this experience. And you know, one of my favourite moments from the event was being on stage with Downstate, and you know, we're singing along to Cody Rhodes' theme Kingdom, which was performed by them, and you know, everyone's just losing their marbles to it. And there was another fun part of that event as well, which was included Mark Henry being the special guest DJ. There's something that did happen that I uploaded later in the year, and I'll it's all these little bits of foreshadowing, but I'll come on to that. Also, I was at WWE World. I got a really cool tattoo here, which was in tribute of the late Bray Wyatt. I went to SmackDown, the Hall of Fame. I was at NXT Stand and Deliver, and then, of course, onto WrestleMania 40 itself. I will talk about those events just quickly, just saying how it was really nice to just be part of that experience, especially with the Hall of Fame. I think my favourite part of the Hall of Fame was, you know, the induction of Paul Heyman. I grew up watching wrestling in the aftermath of ECW, and you know, him, especially when he was a big influence in WWE as well, like, you know, especially when he was booking for SmackDown, and also, you know, him being on screen with like all sorts of people, you know, Brock Lesnar, CM Punk, and obviously in most recent years Roman Reigns. NXT Stand and Deliver was a really fun event, and my favourite match from that was Obafemi versus Josh Briggs versus Dijak for the North American Championship. All loads of big meaty men slapping meat, and some really big high offense spots throughout that match really sold it for me. And you know, if you want to see big meaty men slapping meat, this is the place to come to. And then we come on to WrestleMania 40 itself. Both nights were absolutely incredible. It was really nice to be back at WrestleMania for the first time in 5 years, and as I mentioned earlier, April 6th, 2024 was my 10,000th day of my life, and I was attending night one of WrestleMania 40 for that, to commemorate the celebration. Night one I thought was pretty decent. You know, the opening match between Rhea Ripley and Becky Lynch was, you know, a decent opener. The ladder match was really fun. There were some other good bits throughout the night that included Sami Zayn dethroning Gunther to win the Intercontinental Championship. The night one main event was really good, I'm not going to lie. I was genuinely surprised by The Rock, I was, considering he had not wrestled a full-length wrestling match in 11 years at that point, and I know he did have that little 6-second encounter with Eric Rowan at WrestleMania 32. That doesn't really count though, does it? But you know what, he was doing really well throughout the match, and you know, the fact that him and Roman picked up the victory, setting the stage for what we would see on night 2, and night 2, I think, was probably the better of the two in my opinion this year. Kicking off the event, we had Drew McIntyre beating Seth Rollins for the World Heavyweight Championship. CM Punk was on commentary and he attacked Drew after the match, leading to Damian Priest cashing in his Money in the Bank contract, winning the World Heavyweight Championship in the process. There was a lot of good stuff throughout the night, including Snoop Dogg on commentary. Watching it back and watching Snoop Dogg on commentary for the Philadelphia Street Fight was a lot of fun, and I could not stop myself but laughing. But he was absolutely incredible, he was. Like, that's what you should be doing more often. I know he's a WWE Hall of Famer, but he should be definitely be doing more commentary gigs for WWE. Also, on night 2, we had Logan Paul defending his US Championship against Kevin Owens and Randy Orton. I think the highlight of that match was ISO Speed disguised as a Prime Bottle and taking an RKO from Randy Orton. That was some funny stuff. Bayley beat Io Sky to win the Women's Championship, and you know, a nice moment of redemption for her, and honestly probably one of the best women's matches I've seen this year. And then the Night 2 main event, Roman Reigns versus Cody Rhodes. It's going to be Bloodline Rules, in the words of Sandy Zapp. I love wrestling for a whole load of reasons, and one of the reasons I love is the storytelling. And you know, this has literally been the case for Cody Rhodes to finish the story, finally winning the WWE Championship. And the story we went through throughout this match, you know, it was 20 odd minutes of just, you know, Roman and Cody one-on-one, but then everything started to, you know, happen. Jimmy Uso appears, Jey Uso comes out to even the odds, then Solo Sikoa comes out to attack Cody, out comes John Cena to even the odds, then The Rock comes out, and then Seth Rollins tries to even the odds in Shield gear, and you know, that doesn't amount to anything at that point. But then a familiar gong and everyone's losing their marbles and the bloody Undertaker shows up. And the climax of that match, of course, being Roman, you know, taking the chair. He has a chance to finish off Cody once and for all, but he delivers a chair shot to Seth Rollins. That moment was poetic because it had been nearly 10 years to the day since the Shield broke up, courtesy of Seth Rollins driving a chair into Roman Reigns' back. Very poetic, very nice callback. But then a trifecta of crossroads later, and 1, 2, 3, finish the story. Cody Rhodes is the undisputed WWE champion, and that was such a great moment to witness live. I genuinely had to pause for a few seconds because I'm like, is this real life? And then I snapped myself back into reality, and it's like, he's only gone and bloody done it. And it was such a lovely moment to see him, you know, celebrating with friends and family. You know, first his wife appears, Brandy, then, you know, his, you know, friends, fellow wrestlers come into the ring to celebrate with him. And then a really lovely moment that got me right in the feels was him getting to share the moment with his mum, Michelle. Considering Dusty Rhodes, his father, had passed away nearly 10 years ago, you know, he never got to share that moment with his father. He, you know, was able to do it in spirit, but it was really satisfying that he got to share that moment with his mum. And also the video package that was shown on Raw the following night, the, you know, set to Rise Up by Andrew Day, I cried my eyes out at that. And again, that is such a lovely moment. You know, the talented team of the talented production team for WWE came up with that, and it was just like so lovely to watch that, you know, with Cody and with and all the fans in Philly that night. Really good stuff that was. I would be remiss if I didn't mention, sadly we lost a fluffy companion in the family earlier this year. We lost our lovely cat Bengali. He passed away of natural causes just a few days shy of turning 13. And for those of you who don't know the backstory, we got him when he was in Q8, when he was a street cat, and you know, we took him in, you know, nursed him back to health, and then brought him back to England when we moved back from Q8 just over 12 years ago. He stayed with us throughout all that time, and yeah, he just sadly passed away. And I tell you what feels weird is knowing that every calendar year that I have been around, there's always been we've always had a cat to kind of look after. And it feels weird going into 2025 knowing that there is no cat to be looking after this time. It does feel a bit weird, doesn't it? But I really do miss him. He really gave us some lovely memories, and yeah, meow. I don't know how to end that bit off. I know it's a bit somber moment, but just it is really sad to think about. May, it was another quiet month in my opinion, but you know, just everything going by. But one of the cool things that did happen in May was the sudden appearance of the Northern Lights. And you know, it's very unusual to see the Northern Lights this far south, but we got it, we got to see it, and it was all really nice in the sky. And I will talk about something as well with the Northern Lights, because I did see the Northern Lights as well later in the year, but I will talk about that. Also, a really funny moment that happened in May was, of course, Rishi Sunak appearing outside number 10 in the pouring rain and calling a general election. And I find it really funny that, you know, that moment for Rishi Sunak was overshadowed by, one, him being completely drenched when he was, you know, announcing the general election, and two, there were protesters in the background blaring out "Things Can Only Get Better" by D-Ream. which was of course the '97 Labour theme for their general election victory that year. But yeah, it was really funny to like see that all happening and transpiring, and it would set the stage for what would be an interesting kind of campaign. And then for June, I then went on another little trip away. This time it was to Barcelona, and this trip was more of a case of, you know, I went to Philly and I was completely exhausted by the end of it, but then for this trip to Barcelona, it was more of a case of just being a bit more laid back, just enjoy a few things while I'm out there. I got to, you know, relax by the beach. I got to go to Montserrat. I went on a day trip of kayaking, and then to end off the trip I went on a really nice catamaran tour at sunset. That was all really just nice, and it's interesting to say that I did vlog the trip, but I'll be completely honest, I didn't get around to uploading it just because it was nice to just enjoy some downtime to myself. I didn't really vlog all that much. I did get, you know, clips of like the activities that I got up to, but other than that, it just was more of a case of just relaxing. Didn't really need the camera in front of me. Also in June, I went to Manchester with my mum and we got to go see The Killers. It's become something of a tradition every year or so where me and my mum get to go to like a really fun concert. You know, the last few years we went to go see Coldplay. This year it was The Killers, and it just performing out so many great tunes. And and of course, as I'm sure you probably are aware, I belted my heart out to Mr. Brightside, because of course you do. It's almost like every Brit knows the lyrics to Mr. Brightside, and you know, if we could adopt that as our national anthem, I'd very much be on board with that. Also in June, I got to spend some time with Becca and Ethan, two of my good friends, where we had a weekend in Blackpool, which was, you know, a nice little change of pace. I've never been to Blackpool, but prior to this trip, I know when my grandparents were around, they talked about the idea of like going on a trip to Blackpool, but never came to fruition, unfortunately. But you know, we had a really great time all the same. We went to Blackpool Pleasure Beach. We went out for a really fun evening of just like drinking and just enjoying, you know, the good positive vibes of Blackpool. I wouldn't rule out going again to Blackpool in the future as well. And then we come to July. This was a very interesting month for me as well. I got to play my part in the lead up to the general election. I got to campaign for my local candidate, Luke Meyer, who successfully was elected as the MP for Middlesbrough South and East Cleveland, beating Simon Clarke. Also in the lead up to election day on the campaign trail, at the beginning of July, I got to meet the now Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner. Here's a nice little picture of me, Angela and Luke. And I remember saying to her in that moment how lovely it was to be part of, you know, this movement, and, you know, considering the similarities between us, you know, we both had support for different reasons from the last Labour government under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. And look at us now, you know, all grown up, we're all doing our good part for the sake of democracy. And yeah, Labour won by a massive landslide, which I wasn't expecting it to be in the style of like how they won in 1997, but here we are. And we got to celebrate as well, and also with the team from Redcar, where Anna Turley was re-elected in that seat, and you know, she lost the seat 5 years ago, but she won that seat again, so that was lovely. A lot of great music, a lot of drinking, a lot of, you know, some homemade pizzas as well. Very all good vibes that was. Also in July, England got to the Euros final, and no, we didn't win. It's kind of a given at this point, like, you know, England are going to get to a tournament final and they're just going to throw it all away. Although, unlike the Lionesses did in the Euros a few years ago, the women's Euros that is. So, unless you're the Lionesses, you're not going to be successful. Keep on trying, lads, but we'll get there eventually. In fact, that's now something I'm thinking about, is will the men's team win a major tournament during my lifetime? I guess it remains to be seen. Then in August, I'll be completely honest, it was going to be a very quiet month, but then all of a sudden I had this really spontaneous decision, like later in the month, and I was like, sod it, I'm gonna do it. Originally I wasn't gonna go to All In at Wembley Stadium this year, but sure enough, I decided last minute, sod it, I'm gonna do it. And in fact, a friend of mine coaxed me into doing it, and I don't regret it because it was bloody amazing. But yeah, I went to All In again at Wembley Stadium, hosted by AEW. The night beforehand, before Wembley, I went to a really fun evening which was hosted by the wrestler Grado and also Tom Campbell of Cultaholic, where basically Grado just told stories from his years in wrestling. I won't go into depth of it because, you know, it's all he prefers to keep it private, but there was a lot of great fun stuff on there. And also we ended off the night, you know, with us dancing along to Like a Prayer. I can't obviously play the audio for obvious reasons, but it was a really fun night nonetheless. Then for All In itself, I went to Wembley Stadium, and I found out, like, as soon as we got to our gate, that we were being upgraded. So for context, I had only booked like an upper tier seat just a few days beforehand, and then when we got to Wembley Stadium, the staff told us that, oh, your whole section's being upgraded, and I'm like, I can't complain to that. So we got this really great view, and shout out to the team at Wembley Stadium for hooking us up with those upgraded seats. The event itself I really enjoyed. Some highlights of the night included Mariah May versus Timeless Toni Storm. Here's a fun thing to think about. Mariah May, yes, she won the Women's World Championship in that match, but during that match she kissed Nigel McGuinness, who was on commentary, on the forehead. Later in the night, Nigel McGuinness wrestles his first match in 13 years and also comes out to the song Fucking in the Bushes by Oasis. And just a few days after, Oasis announced their reunion tour, and I'm solely just saying this right now, this butterfly effect is the result of Mariah May, and we all have her to thank for this lovely little bit of history. Also, some really fun bits I enjoyed in the event were Will Ospreay versus MJF. I tell you what I really enjoyed about Ospreay's entrance was, you know, it all being Assassin's Creed themed. They got Roger Craig Smith, who did the voice of Ezio in the earlier Assassin's Creed games, and like it was almost like, you know, in the Animus those two are finally meeting. So it's nice to think that now Will Ospreay is technically part of Assassin's Creed canon, and he got the victory, he won the International Championship back from MJF, and it was a really good match. And of course, probably one of the greater highlights of the night was seeing Bryan Danielson versus Swerve Strickland. Bryan Danielson coming out to the final countdown as well. And for those of you who don't know, I've been a fan of Bryan Danielson, or Daniel Bryan when he was in WWE, for years, so getting to finally experience the final countdown in the flesh with his entrance, that was amazing, that was. And then he won the match, and sure enough, he, you know, got to celebrate with his friends and his family. And what was really quite funny is, as you know, pyro and confetti was, you know, going off, one thing he did was he tried to do a hurricane. I think he was trying to powerbomb his son or something, and like Bree's just like there, no, Bryan, don't do this. It was a lovely, funny moment. And again, it was really nice to be part of two of the biggest wrestling events this year. You know, I was at the biggest event for WWE this year, and likewise the biggest event for AEW this year, so good to do that both in the calendar year. Then for September, again, quiet month all around, but I did something really exciting at the end of the month, which was I went to a concert at the Royal Albert Hall, and I went to go see Final Fantasy VII Rebirth in concert, which was a lovely experience. That's another thing that's worth mentioning is, you know, in addition to the storytelling aspect of Final Fantasy VII, one of my favourite things about the original game was the soundtrack. And in turn, like with Rebirth and Remake, you know, having that soundtrack just completely adapted, and, you know, hearing, you know, pieces from Rebirth throughout the concert was just incredible. I think my favourite pieces that were performed included, you know, the theme from The Gold Saucer, No Promises to Keep, the instrumental version, that made me cry. Also really cool to finally hear One Winged Angel, Sephiroth's theme, as well as Aerith's theme that plays at the very end of the game, and that got me in floods of tears, that did. And oddly enough, it's been on my bucket list for some time to see a live concert which is just like video game music, and this did not disappoint. And, you know, for the next installment of Final Fantasy VII, the remake series, whenever that might be released, I'm sure enough going to go to a concert for that as well, if they do another one. And I'm sure they do like other types of concerts for this as well, but I really enjoyed that. And sure enough, I would definitely do it again. Then for October, again, quiet month. It's becoming a bit of a theme, these quiet months, but October I went to Newcastle again, and I went to go to a WWE house show at the Utilita Arena, or as I'm old enough to remember it being the Metro Arena or the Metro Center Arena. But that was a really good event as well. You know, I like on house shows where they can just have a bit more fun and just like, you know, just not take it too seriously. So there was some really fun event-like matches happening throughout. Jey Uso defended his Intercontinental Championship against Bron Breakker. Everyone was yeeting, which was really fun. Yeet! Randy Orton teamed with DIY against the Bloodline, Tama Tonga Tongaloa, and Jacob Fatu. I love you, Solo. That I can't get out of my head. Bloody Jacob Fatu. But that was a really fun match. The main event was a steel cage between Cody Rhodes and Solo Sikoa for the undisputed WWE Championship. And one of my favourite spots in the match is Cody's climbing the cage. You know, Solo's in like a prone position, and he does a Cody cutter from the top of the cage, which is just, it's dangerous, but bloody hell, that was a great spot. And in the aftermath of the match, Cody was in the ring, and he invited a fan into the ring called Paige, who had just completed chemotherapy, and she was in remission after a cancer diagnosis. And Cody gave her his ring jacket, the one he wore at SummerSlam earlier this year, and that was a lovely moment. I can't help but feel really happy for Paige, and I'm glad to hear that, you know, you're doing really well right now. But that was a really heartwarming moment, and I love the fact that one thing that Cody does now that he's champion is, like, at most house shows he's staying after, and you know, well after the show is finished, and you know, taking pictures and signing things with fans who are who are at the barricade. I was this close to meeting him, but it wasn't meant to be. But I love Cody, he's such a great lad. And then we come on to November. Now, of course, as you guys may know, November is the month in which my birthday falls on the 19th, of course. And before that date, I got to celebrate my preliminary celebrations for my birthday with Becca and Ethan once again. We went to Ethan's new place. He just got a house earlier this year, so good on him. And we went to Sheffield and had a really fun day out of just like games and just, you know, just getting out and about and exploring, just having some fun time with each other, and just, you know, a much needed catch up as well. And then also in November, the big highlight for this month was of course me going to Iceland. It was another new country for me, and I've talked about this before, how Iceland was on my kind of like to-do list back a few years prior, so I ultimately put the kibosh on that trip in favour of going to Norway. But then in a similar vein for this trip, I was like, I definitely want to do this time around. So sure enough, I went to Iceland. I got some really fun stuff. I went to the Golden Circle, I explored a lot of Reykjavik, I swam in the Secret Lagoon, the oldest natural swimming pool in Iceland itself. I went to do some whale watching off the Bay of Reykjavik, which was very scrumdiddly-dumptious. And to end off the trip, I once again got to see the Northern Lights. Again, very much reminded me of what I did in Norway a few years ago, but it was a really satisfying way to end off the trip. And I'm really fortunate that, you know, for the entire time that I was in Iceland, it was, you know, nice and clear throughout, and there was no, like, you know, disruption in terms of like seeing the Northern Lights, because that's one of the key things. You need a really clear sky, no light pollution, and, you know, in a very isolated area, and you should get a really good vantage point. And sure enough, we went to a few spots in Iceland that evening, and I really loved that moment. And again, very scrumdiddly-dumptious to say the least. And then to end off the year, of course, we have December. And I'll be completely honest, December was a very busy month, especially with the lead up to Christmas. But one of the things that I did do in December was go to a few Christmas parties in relation to work. I won't discuss what I did because it's all private, but I will just say I think I did well. You know, and I'm proud of what I did. But also in December, like, this thing just happened completely out of the blue, and I'm surprised it did as well as it did. But I went viral on TikTok, which is just something that wasn't on my 2024 bingo card. But yeah, I went viral on TikTok, and the reason being is, so as I mentioned earlier in the year, I was part of Remix Rumble in April in Philly. And one of the things that I did as part of the event was I got to film some really cool moments, and one cool moment that I got to film was Mark Henry, the WWE Hall of Famer. With him being the special guest DJ, his theme song from WWE, you know, somebody gonna get their ass kicked, you know, that one, that started playing, and he, you know, I caught the moment with him on stage where, you know, he got the crowd to, you know, sing along to it, and that was brilliant. Genuinely, I uploaded it at the right time. The algorithm picked it up, shared it around, and sure enough, it did, you know, a lot of great numbers. In fact, I'm gonna check to see how well it's done. So as of recording, it's in excess of about 627,000 viewers. And then I've seen people sharing it on Twitter, I've seen people sharing it on Instagram. It's been doing the rounds, and it's just like, how did that happen? But in all seriousness, it was really great to be part of that event earlier in the year. And again, a shout out to Rohan and the team of Remix Rumble, who really made that, you know, a really fun part of my 2024. And, you know, I could be here showering them with all sorts of praise, but they did really well with that event. And, you know, they've been doing quite a few of them throughout the year, and also they're going to be doing it, you know, as part of the Royal Rumble at the beginning of February, as well as WrestleMania 41 in Las Vegas in April. I will just quickly mention with the latter, to kind of transition into what I'm getting up to in 2025, I'm not going to be at WrestleMania next year. I think mainly because of like costs, and I did have it in my mind for like the longest time, but I've ultimately decided I'm not going to go to WrestleMania next year. As sad as that is, you know, I thought I've had a really great time this year in Philly for WrestleMania, but we'll just have to wait and see if I do end up going to Mania again in the future. But yeah, that was 2024, and to kind of talk about 2025 as a kind of like brief, what am I getting up to? I've got another concert planned with my mum. We're going to go see One Republic in Manchester in September. In June, I'm going on a nice family holiday to Kavta in Croatia, which is not too far from Dubrovnik, and that's to celebrate my brother turning 30, which just feels weird. That reminds me my mum's turning 60 as well next year. It's just so crazy to think, and I'm a few years off turning 30 myself. How did that happen? But another thing I am going to miss about 2025 is the WWE Network coming to an end, because Netflix now have the international streaming rights for most territories, including the UK. So it's going to feel weird not going to any watch-along events anymore, like the ones that Hooked on Wrestling do, because Netflix have these really strict rules about streaming like commercial properties. So I might just have to watch it all from home and do my reactions like old school from there. But overall, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in 2025. I mean, I'm for a fact I'm still going to be uploading, and you know, I don't show any signs of stopping, but I do acknowledge at the same time that, you know, my uploading throughout the years has kind of like become less and less frequent. But that's not to say that, you know, I'm stopping doing YouTube altogether. I'm a busy person at the moment, and say when I do have some time to, you know, make content, then, you know, it's always such a joy. But anyway, with that being said, that's the end of the 2024 season. Good night. I'm sure we've all been seeing that on TikTok as well, and I'm guilty to say I've done that myself too. But yeah, peace out 2024, you've been really great. So to sign off, as per usual, I'm going to leave you with some advice, and that is always to enjoy yourself, stay safe, and make the most of every opportunity that comes your way. Thank you for watching, and peace.